Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 1 of the Fibro Guys Corner. Last season was a great introduction to the world of podcasting. However, for this season, we are going to change it up. In today's podcast, Fibro Guys Jonny and Hedda are talking about something they talk about a lot with their clients who are nearing the end of their recoveries whilst at the studio. And that is, what the hell is normal? When someone's been ill for so long, they tend to become very interoceptive and start to notice very subtle things or changes to their bodies. For those who've never experienced chronic pain before, they will likely brush over a calf muscle that's randomly twitching, or indeed not even notice it at all. But for those in pain, or for our guys at the end of their recoveries, it's hard to ascertain what is actually normal when it comes to the human body, or even what the hell do you expect when you're no longer in pain every day? What is normal? So, here is Season 2, Episode 1. Enjoy.
Welcome everyone to Fibro Guys Corner. Today we have myself for the first time, and I also have with me today Hedda, who runs Newcastle.
Hello everyone. So in today's episode, we're going to discuss what's normal, because while our clients are recovering, the question of whether some things are normal or not always comes up.
So what is normal?
Everybody's normal is going to be different. Like if you look at identical twins, for example, even though they have the exact same DNA, they will experience their normal to be completely different. I even have a friend who is an identical twin, where she has been ill for years and years, while her twin sister is going to university and is completely healthy. So even if when it comes down to something that you would expect to be exactly the same, it's not going to be like that.
Because it's unique to each of them, despite the fact that they may have the same DNA.
Yeah.
Their life experiences will be different. They all experience things different, so their normals will be different.
Exactly. You gave a really good example earlier of like a farmer. Maybe you can take that one.
So the example I used before we started the podcast, which I stupidly should have waited, was if we took, say, a farmer and we swapped them with an office worker, each of them would be in a completely different situation from what they find normal. What would be common sense to the farmer would be total gobbledygook to someone who works in an office, rearing the animals, looking after them, shaving the sheep at the right time, knowing what to do with everything, how to run all the equipment. And it would be the same for the farmer, because they'd be thrown into this environment where everything they know wouldn't really fit. So even though each of them is very good at what they do, it would not be normal by any means necessary for either of them. But in their own areas, it is normal.
Yeah. And I would imagine if you put like someone who works in an office into a farm to live a normal farm life, they would experience strange symptoms like more tiredness, for example, because they're doing a more physical job. Whereas if you take like the farmer into the office, he would probably get tired too, because he's so used to being around, walking and like being active all the time, that when he suddenly isn't using all of that energy, he would get more tired as well.
Well, it would be different tiredness that they would experience, because think of it from their different points of view. Farmer, very physical, very active. So when he goes into a role that maybe requires a lot more mental work and concentration, he might get mentally fatigued. Whereas the office worker going to the farmer, he's going to have aching muscles at the end of every day until he gets used to it, until it becomes his new normal.
Yeah, exactly. So if you look at like our clients, for example, what are some of the things that they ask you if it's normal or not when they're going through the recovery?
When going through recovery, I think everything and anything gets questioned, because I think when you're not in a chronic state, you don't question everything. You have a niggle in your knee, it's fine, it's just a niggle. You have a wee ache in your arm, you don't even think about it. But when you get into a position where you've been chronically ill for a while, every little niggle, ache, eye twitch, skin twitch, they all get questioned, and you look at it a lot more. And sometimes we even add symptoms to our own illness in that way, because it could just be a totally benign eye twitch, but because it's new, we just tie it in to our list.
Yeah, Exactly. So everything that's like new feels way, way bigger than it actually has to be. And that doesn't mean that they're wrong necessarily, but in a way, it's like it's not something to worry about. If they weren't ill or had been ill for a long time, they wouldn't even have noticed it. It would have been something that was just irritating.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you mean. It's, I think when it comes down to it, even for people in chronic pain, they each have their own normal. But the problem is, I don't even think they know what that is because they just keep changing it. Normal to them is just being completely pain free, symptom free, 100%. But for everyone else, it's, completely different things.
And if you actually, like for me, for example, if I actually think back to when I was normal, if I fell over and I banged my knee, it would hurt for a while. Of course, like my knee is going to hurt. And I would get little twitches in my eye, and I would maybe have a little bit of an extra headache, or I would feel extra tired. But because all of those things have kind of been put down to a diagnosis when I first got ill, and they like all of the things I experienced was because of the diagnosis, even though it might have been something I would have had regardless of what state I was in.
Another one I get quite a lot in sessions is, especially for myself as well, because I used to get these when I was sick, is myokemia, which is basically when your eyelid twitches. But no, it's perfectly normal, perfectly harmless. Can be so many different triggers from it for, too much caffeine, or if you take a lot of caffeine, not enough, lack of sleep, bright lights, stress. But they are perfectly harmless and usually go away really quickly. Most of the reasons for them are benign, and if there was any other kind of cause, they are usually accompanied by other symptoms that are more serious than twitching of an eyelid.
Yeah, because everyone gets them. Like if it's an eye twitch, or if it's like twitches down the back of your legs after a long walk, or maybe like down your biceps, or even like little spasms as well. Maybe you've just overused your muscles in the gym, and or you've been a bit dehydrated, and then suddenly your muscle spasms. It's completely normal. Obviously, if it
Yeah.
goes on for a really long period of time and it's really like it's accompanied by other symptoms, it might be something that's worth checking out. But if it goes on for 2 to 3 days and then it just disappears, it's most likely not something you need to worry about.
Yeah, the one thing I always find quite interesting when talking about kind of what's normal is things like stiffness.
Yeah.
Stiffness, cramps, because I mean, stiffness in itself is very subjective, especially when, like, for someone like yourself who's hypermobile, the fact that you can feel subjectively stiff and yet still have a much larger range of motion than myself. Yeah, I might feel completely limber, ready to go, but I won't be able to get as far into a movement as yourself, despite the fact you feel stiff.
Yeah. So it's a subjective feeling, and it can come from many different things. Feeling stiff, stiffness can even be from like being stressed. Like if you have a really stiff neck, maybe you've been sitting in front of your computer all day and you're just like typing away, and you haven't moved out of your position in a long time. You're probably going to feel stiff.
Well, I think that's where a lot of people with pain instead of stiffness, because if you're in a more kind of protective state, if you're in a more chronic state, your brain might interpret that stiffness instead of just making you feel stiff, you might get the output of pain, in which case a lot more serious. It feels a lot more serious for yourself, but there's nothing different going on at the tissue level.
It's exactly the same, or maybe it just needs a bit more blood flow. So you literally just have to move your neck and your shoulders a bit because you've been sedentary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because we are designed. I mean, we've literally evolved to move.
Yeah.
Everything we do involves movement. So sitting still for long periods of time can make us stiff and sore. And all it takes is getting up, moving around, and generally we'll feel fine within a few minutes without even realizing it.
Yeah, like if you, for example, look at babies playing at the floor. So you put a baby down and there's loads of toys around it, and you keep a little eye on it. They're probably not going to be in the same position for longer than 30 seconds, because then they're going to move into a different one, move around, maybe crawl forward a bit. And if you look at that, they are moving in a way where they're not, how do I say it, like locked into a position, like because they have to do something. They're
Mhm.
just moving in a natural way because that's how we're designed to move.
Well, yeah, it would explain as well, because I mean, babies, they literally just start shuffling before they even start crawling. just moving random muscles just to move.
Mhm.
And it makes total sense, because if we're designed to move from a very early age, we are moving constantly, trying to keep some sort of motion going somewhere. So it does make sense that if we suddenly stop all movement, then we would feel more restricted and more restrained and less able to kind of move unimpeded.
Yeah, for sure. And if you also like, you can do like the car example, for example.
Whenever I get in the car and I drive for 20, 30 minutes, I don't feel anything. But if I'm in the car for, say, a couple hours, by the time I get out, I'm all stiff, I'm a little achy, but within about 5, 10 minutes of getting out of the car, stretching, moving about, unless I've spent that whole time focusing on how stiff I was, I've completely forgotten and it's gone away.
Yeah. So stiffness as well is just, it's normal, and it has nothing, usually it doesn't have anything to do with what's going on at the tissue level. If you have like a very restricted range of motion with stiffness and other symptoms as well, then yes, it might be something to check out. But in normal day-to-day life, it's probably not something to worry about.
I think another thing is that when you're sick, what becomes your normal is putting down everything down to your diagnosis. Doesn't matter if it's related or not. And I mean, that's not the individual's fault. I remember going to my doctors about completely unrelated stuff when I was sick, and everything was literally just given the same diagnosis. Oh, it's probably just your fibro. It's just your fibro. It's just a symptom of fibro. And I think you just end up getting into the habit of every new thing that happens in your life ends up being, oh, it's just a symptom.
Yeah.
And
Even
then you
though,
eventually,
yeah, sorry, I
sorry, I
interrupted
was
you.
just going to say, you eventually get lost in the symptoms.
Yeah. And you can't really separate what's normal, like in a, not being ill, and what's a part of being ill. It becomes like a juggled mess, basically.
Yeah, you end up blowing the trivial stuff way out of proportion.
Yeah.
And the big one as well that I've noticed amongst new clients especially is body scanning. It becomes this new normal, like from the second you wake up, to kind of scan your body and go, am I okay? How's everything looking? How much pain am I in?
Yeah.
Whereas when we're not ill, we never do that. We never randomly check over ourselves and see how we are. And it just goes to show that your normal changes over time as a person. If you're sick, your normal will change. If you're healthy, your normal will change. Your normal is based on your upbringing, your job. That's why normal is really, really subjective.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard to put down what's normal. But if you look at like benign little symptoms that everyone gets, because everyone gets stiff, it's not necessarily something to worry about. So if we move on to like pain, because pain in itself is actually quite normal. It's a really good protective mechanism, and it's something that we're kind of designed to feel. And pain is basically just an output based on all the brain's processing of all the information that's coming in. And I don't need to make this more complicated, but basically what I'm trying to say here is if you feel little niggles and little pains here and there, maybe you've been going really hard at the gym, or maybe you went for a long run, or maybe you just sat down for too long and you have a little bit of pain, it's probably completely normal. But if you look at like chronic pain, for example, or being in constant pain all the time with no reason, that's not normal. I'm talking about like the little, oh, maybe your chest hurts a bit, or oh, I have a little bit of lower back pain, or whatever it is. That's a completely normal part of being a human. And the thing is, like, normal pain changes as well based on other factors, what's going on around you. Maybe like if I, for example, prod you with a pen. So I take my pen, you don't know me, and I lightly prod you in the shoulder, that's going to hurt a bit more than maybe if someone you were really close to were prodding you, just based on the circumstances and the person prodding you. So the
I
pain.
actually, sorry to interrupt you there a wee bit. I actually read a study that was similar to what you were just saying there, and it was about how what they found was if you take your own hand and basically push a nail into your skin and then stop once you get pain, and you have someone else do the same thing, and then apply the same amount of pressure that you apply to yourself to them and have them do it to you, the pain will activate a lot sooner than when you get to the amount of pressure that you apply to yourself. and it'll be the same for when they do it to you, because it's a foreign object kind of trying to apply pressure that you don't have as much control over. So it's going to be deemed a higher threat instead of, oh, well, I'm just pushing down on my skin, I know what's going on, and I'm in control.
Yeah. And I think everyone would have the same like experience with that, because if you're not in control over something, it's going to feel a lot more scary and you'll go into that protective mode a lot sooner to keep yourself safe.
Since we're already kind of talking about pain, I think we should talk about the one thing that's not normal when it comes to people in pain, and that's something called congenital analgesia. So there are people who get that diagnosed with this, and it's basically where their brain doesn't process pain. They don't feel pain at all. And it might sound really good in the long and short, being pain free, absolutely brilliant. But the problem is there's a reason that we've evolved it. There's a reason that every animal has some sort of pain mechanism, and it's because we've evolved it as a survival tool. If, going back a few thousand years, if I was hunting and didn't know I had a broken leg, that could, that would usually stop me from loading it, and I keep loading it and I keep loading it and putting more weight on it and causing more damage. Eventually that leg might just be completely useless. I might damage it to the point where it no longer will bear my weight. So therefore I can't hunt, I can't walk, and then I might, well, probably will, die. If I catch a virus and it totally wreaks havoc with me, I won't know to go to the doctors, to go to the hospital. If I get infection or sepsis, or it wouldn't matter what happens, I wouldn't know what was going on, wouldn't seek help, so I would pass away. And in fact, I think people with that condition don't actually live very long. It's very rare for them to live kind of into their 30s and beyond, because of the fact that something so small that any of us would get sort of a warning sign for, they get the pain, they don't. So then it becomes a much more serious issue. So they have to literally body scan every day, check all their bones, make sure they don't feel anything broken, nothing's swollen that shouldn't be, everything's kind of in the right place.
Yeah. And that's
when you
the only place, sorry, I'm interrupting you, but that's like the only place where body scanning is actually a good thing, because people who do experience pain don't need to do body scan. If it's something alarming, you will be alarmed of it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time when it comes to things like pain, it's always seen as sort of a masculinity indicator. I know it is, at least for men, this whole growing up, it's always who has the highest pain tolerance. And to discover that pain tolerance isn't as much of a set thing, it's ever fluctuating. I mean, I could have multiple days of doing the same things, and yet different levels of pain or discomfort just based on how I'm feeling. If I get plenty of sleep one night, I'll be in a better place, so I'll probably get less pain. If I've not slept very well, I've not eaten, I'm in a rush, I'm stressed, all those can impact how my brain would process any kind of danger or threat, and ultimately change how much pain I feel.
Yeah, again, based on like your surroundings and the environment, and also how you woke up feeling.
Yeah, everything. And tiredness, fatigue. There's even, physical fatigue, emotional fatigue. Emotional fatigue even ties in with social media overuse. If you've got a long day at work, if you do a really hard workout and you start running for the first time, it can be completely normal to be even more tired. It doesn't mean that you are overly unfit or, not strong. It just literally means that for you, this isn't your normal. So the way that your brain's going to interpret what you're doing is going to be different. But if every day you started to work out, or after that long day at work, you worked out every day, after a while, eventually that would be the new normal. You would stop getting things like DOMS. You wouldn't feel as tired. In fact, you'd probably feel even more energized after the workout. And that would become your normal. Because again, it's a subjective thing that changes as your life experiences change.
And also, if you're doing a lot of things you're enjoying and you're in a good routine, there's no need for your brain to make you tired. That doesn't mean that it's abnormal to feel tired after a long day at work doing a job you really love. because you have been using your brain, you've been using your body. Like being tired is normal. Some days you're more tired than others.
One thing I would like to ask you about actually is clicking in the joints.
Yeah.
So one I get all the time with clients, clicking in the joints. Is this normal? My knees click, my elbows click, my hips click. What's your take on clicking?
Well, me as a hypermobile person, or like I have hypermobile EDS, I click probably a lot more than other people. Like I really want to click my fingers now that I'm talking about it. But basically it's called articular release, and it's seen in healthy joints and unhealthy joints. So basically what you're doing is you're pushing a bit of oxygen out of your joint, and it's giving you a little bit more room inside of your joint. It's nothing dangerous about it. It's just a little bit of gas being released. And whenever a client like comes up and asks me, what I do is I just like crouch down on the floor, and you can just hear my knees go. I have no pain with it or anything. It's literally just a bit of gas being released from my joints, and it's nothing to talk about.
Yeah, I think when it comes to kind of, joints specifically, I think you need to kind of take into context of what you're actually doing. Oh, am I doing squats? My knees are clicking. Good chance it's just gas. It's like gas escaping, creating that clicking noise. Nothing wrong. Am I deadlifting 400 pounds? Then yeah, maybe it's because you're doing it a bit too heavy and you should lower the weight. So I think with stuff like that, you just look at the context. Are you doing a normal kind of exercise that isn't putting tons of stress or pressure on a joint? Then it's most likely gas. Because I think a lot of it is that the fear of that noise. People hear that click and they think, oh, something's bad's happened, and they kind of build it up in their head, and eventually they might even end up with pain in that joint because of how worked up they get over that random clicking that is just part of everyday normal life.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, everyone wants to have a reason for every single noise, every single niggle, everything they're experiencing. But most of the time, it doesn't really have a cause, and it's just something that bodies do.
Well, that's just it. Like, even for bodies, what is normal? Some people can eat dairy, some can't. Some can ingest certain E numbers. Other people break out in a rash if they do. I mean, I know someone that literally can't drink Iron Brew, or I think she can only drink Coke and a few select other things because of a specific E number that took her years to figure out that it was that was triggering it, because otherwise she has an allergic reaction. I was just going to say, to her, that is normal. Yeah, for anyone else, it would be a bit abnormal.
And everyone has their little weird things that aren't actually that weird, because to that individual, that's normal. Like some people get really, really bad hangovers after drinking alcohol. Others don't. It just depends on you.
Yeah, so I think the theme of today's episode is that everyone's normal is different. It doesn't matter if you are tall, short, square, round, man, woman, you're going to have different normals. Even if you are the same size, shape, gender as someone else, you're going to have different normals. You might even have some that you share, but you're going to, in some ways, not see eye to eye in something that you'll think is normal, but they'll think is totally nuts. I mean, if you're fit and healthy, you go to the gym, you run every other day, that's your normal. If you're a very social person, you go to bars, clubs, you see your pals on the regular, that's your normal. If you sit down on the sofa all day and obsess over your pain, that's going to be your normal. I think your normal is what you make it.
Yeah, for sure. And you can create whatever normal you want.
I think before we go and make this podcast any more confusing than it already is,
yeah,
I think that's probably a good note to sort of end on. Normal is subjective.
Yeah, and the normal is what you make it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. And if you want to know more about what we do, how we work, and why our clients are so successful compared to people who try other modalities, then head on over to thefibroguy.com. Likewise, if you've tried different modalities to recover and they haven't worked for you, but they have for your friends, then you may also, while you're at the site, want to download our free ebook, Why Do Treatments Work for Some People but Not Others, where we explain the complex variables behind why this happens. And if you have a specific question that you want a practitioner to answer on the podcast, then shoot us over an email at podcast@thefibroguy.com. Take it easy, and once again, thanks for listening.